We're back with another top 5 series, and in today's episode we're going to be going over the top 5 fun towers in TDS. Not so much as powerful or reliable towers, but more or less for entertainment purposes, good towers.
Number 10.
And the number 5 spot we have is the Executioner. Now, while I was making this video, I was thinking about which basically tower at the beginning of the list should be on this list, and quite honestly, the tower that I just kept getting my eyes attracted to, no, not that way, is the Executioner. Now, the thing about the Executioner is that compared to like all of the other like reliable-ish towers, like melee towers are pretty fun to use, like for an example, the Sledger or Brawler, this guy is not so much like them. Sure, he does have a melee weapon, but not only is this melee weapon how he attacks, but is also a ranged weapon. This guy literally throws axes to enemies that ricochet off of one after another and pretty much just goes right back to him like a boomerang. Now, something that I've already probably said is that this thing not only hits one enemy, but also multiple enemies, and does a decent amount of damage. And of course, the more you upgrade this guy, the much more damage and more enemies he can target. Quite honestly, in my opinion, he's not bad, but he's not great, if that makes sense. There are more or less, yes, better options than this guy, but it's nice to play this guy and have him in like these like giant squares or circular parts of the path where you can just take down and hit multiple enemies in a row with just one throw. Quite honestly, this guy is a pretty fun character, and probably the last time I played this guy was like, I don't know, 5 months ago.
Number 9.
Causing carnage and chaos into its way into the number 4 spot is the Mortar. Now, don't worry, I won't do an explosion in your face. Well, at least not right now. The Mortar is quite honestly one of the like mid-ish characters in this game. I did see a lot of people like playing this and using this guy in the Christmas events, but besides that, the Mortar doesn't really have much of appearance in many games, or at least game modes in TDS, since there's just a lot of enemies with tons and thousands of HP. This guy cannot really do a lot, but that doesn't mean that this guy is bad. Quite honestly, he is pretty good. Now, what he does is just, well, rains hellfire from the sky by literally launching missiles to do hundreds. But the more you upgrade him, of course, the more damage he does. And the cooler thing is that once you get him to the second to the last level, he actually starts to deploy cluster bombs after every missile explosion as a little bit of a finishing off the touch with basically enemies that might have a little bit of HP left over the first missile. And what's really fun about these guys is, well, I mean, just look at these explosions. Like, Jesus Christ, dude. And obviously, though, how to make this even more fun is by setting the targets to random. That way, you just have a ton of carnage basically being all over the path. But I guess it is nice and very necessary to have them target only one enemies. But damn, look at this random targeting thing. It looks really awesome and fun with the massive nuke explosions and the cluster bombs just basically bouncing everywhere, doing multiple explosions at once. Quite honestly, the Mortar is great, one of my favorite towers. It's just that I really hope he does get buffed with his damage, because compared to all the other towers, he is definitely missing out on the parties.
Number 7.
Spamming its way into the number 3 spot is the Spawner Towers. Now, as soon as you hear the Spawner Towers, you instantly think of, like, for an example, the army base or the elf camp thing. And quite honestly, that's basically what this number 3 spot is. These towers are basically much different than all of the other towers you actually see in the game, where the regular towers just stand around shooting at enemies that walk by them. Nothing too real special there, but these guys have a completely different mechanic. Setting them down, they will start to slowly spawn in their unit, and they will very slowly make their ways to the hole in the wall where the enemies enter. And quite honestly, there are many different types of spawner towers, and quite honestly, there are some that are better than the other ones. These bases basically all work the exact same way, well, except the Crook Boss and Necromancer, where you essentially just upgrade the base itself to increase the speed of the units' spawn rate, but also the durability and powerhouse they actually do. Warthogs, and then eventually having a gunner, then tanks, and then a literal futuristic tank. Then mercenaries are basically soldiers with insane abilities and powers. Then there's the elf camps that are basically just spawning a bunch of elves everywhere. Then you've got the necromancer cook boss that spawn their units over time, while the necromancer literally spawns undead skeletons that quite honestly just tackle enemies, and a big guy who just throws his axe at enemies. These guys are all really fun to use. They're not really my style at all. I'm not really the type of guy to just put a ton of these guys down and just pray to God that they get in time to clean out the enemies, but goddamn, these things are pretty fun.
Number 11.
Reworking its way into the number 2 spot is the Pursuit Tower. Now, back before the rework, the Pursuit Tower has always been a high tier-ish tower in the game, but then after the rework, they basically introduced a completely different tower into the game. This rework basically gave a ability to the pursuits which allowed them to move anywhere on the map, or at least in a certain area, but the cool thing is that you can literally place them anywhere on the map and protect that area. So it's really fun to just basically make them travel around the map very slowly, but I mean, like, it's cool to just see that helicopter like patrolling the streets like that Left 4 Dead 2 scene or Left 4 Dead scene. As you all know, at the third I think or fourth upgrades for the pursuit, you are given 2 upgrade options. However, you can only choose one. Now you're probably asking which one is the better one, and it's quite obvious, and that is the top one, because Jesus Christ, these enemies have thousands of HP, and having an AoE thing, basically targeting multiple enemies at once and not a single enemy who has tens of thousands HP tanking it all for all of his teammates, is kind of basically asking for certain death. But even though the bottom one does kind of suck a little bit, it still is a pretty fun and awesome tower or helicopter. And the cool thing is that the designs are completely different. This one in the top one is the minigun, and then you could tell the second one by having a tons of missiles. You can have a few pursuits being a single enemy damaging type upgrade variants, and then you can have a bunch of other pursuits having an AoE type of damage, which is still cool and makes the pursuit really a blast to play and use.
Number 1.
Check this out.
There is no argument, there is no debate for the number 1 spot of the most fun tower in TDS, and that is the Gatling. This thing was literally created to be fun. Not only is it fun as hell, it is powerful as hell. I believe that this thing is quite honestly the best and strongest tower in the game. For both damage and range and ammunition wise, and also rate of fire wise, this thing literally disintegrates any enemies. This thing is essentially a little bit of a smaller minigun, or at least turret. However, the cool thing is that there's an ability. For this ability, for this tower, you can control this turret yourself. Not only that, but you can also shoot the turret, look in any direction you want for the turret, and target enemies no matter the distance you are from the turret. Final level, which is, I think, or not even I think, but I know is the most expensive upgrade in the game. And once you upgrade this thing is insane. Does thousands or hundreds of damage, and of course if you have the DJ's effect, it increases the damage with the red track thing, making this thing even more powerful. And of course, when using the ability on this thing on any level, especially the final level, you literally feel like you are just a literal god, disintegrating and just killing enemies without even trying. This thing was literally created to be fun. There is no argument at all. The Gatling is the best, strongest, and by far the funnest tower in TDS.